Chairman, I'd like to invite Phil Boyd up to kind of give the board an update on the Atlas Waterfront project.
Welcome, Mr. Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. Kind of the similar format as previous meetings. I'll just give you a synopsis and glad to answer any questions. So completed, and I say mostly, because there's always little bits and pieces to finish up. The mass grading, the mass earthwork movement is for the most part finished out there. Sewer and storm and water lines are completed, and the shoreline stabilization is mostly completed, which is great. On that last one, because the water, we've accomplished our water, near water work before the water really gets us. We did have a time in there where the water came up and we had to stop work for a while, but now we're back at it. The upcoming work, the buildings, both the restroom building and the storage/maintenance building the foundations are in, and they're starting to come out of the ground, and you'll see some pictures of that. It's interesting that they're actually going to start on the irrigation system next week, which kind of seems counterintuitive this time of year, but they're getting after it. The Riverstone to Atlas connecting trails, you'll start to see that also come out. That's that notch of trees that was removed between the upper area and the lower area. The landscape retaining walls will be moving on, those, and then water access steps as well. Vegetation obviously won't come in until later on in the spring. So I'll zip through a few pictures. I'm still kind of doing the before and after thing. So there's what it used to look like. That's what it currently looks like. These are still the rocks left to go in the landscape walls and the shoreline stabilization walls. You can see down here at what we call the inlet, there's a part of the foundation, and they're working on pouring those steps. And you can see over here they're working on continuing that shoreline stabilization through there. You can start to see the outlines of this is the walking trail, and then over here is the riding trail. Future Atlas Drive that comes off of Atlas Road at the roundabout comes down like that. And then these will obviously be homes in the future.
Phil, where is Block 13 on there?
Block 13, Area 13 is, I'll show you in the next couple more pictures. Yeah. So this is looking the other direction, what it looked like in December. And you can kind of pay attention up in this area. You see that there's the old soils, the very dark soils that were in that area, which were topsoils. And then this is what it currently looks like. And you can see we mined the topsoils out of there and essentially brought in beach material. And I use that term loosely because when people think of beach, they think of sand, but that would not be stable here. So because of the river flows, particularly during the spring runoff. So it's a boulder type material that's more stable. To Commissioner Arman's question, that Area 13 is right down in here.
Okay, thanks.
And then you start to see the parking lot comes up along this way. That's the restroom building coming out of the ground, or sorry, that's the maintenance building. This is the restroom building coming out of the ground. So the parking lot sweeps through here. This is the Prairie Trail in the background, and then Atlas Road comes up like this. You can see Suzanne, the extension of Suzanne, shaping up through here. They're currently putting in this picture, they were putting in some storm sewer, and then the road continues on down this way.
And the Area 13, is that where the potential restaurant?
It is, and I think one of the, either later today, probably tomorrow, we'll talk a little bit about some potential PUD amendments that we might look for the board's direction on whether we want to pursue a PUD amendment to modify what can be used on that site. Because the market is showing us something that we didn't anticipate. And as the board has said many, many times, we want to be nimble and adjust to the market. So that's one of the things we'll be asking for some guidance from the board. This is, again, a little zoom in on the beach area, and you can see here they're mining out what was a big mound. And then in this picture, you can see the mound is gone, and the beach material is put in here. This is the dog park. This is the beach area in here. It's hard to see, but I'll show you a blow-up picture of it. Right here is the accessible swim ramp. And right in here, you can see the rockery wall. This is where the accessible kayak launch will be, and you can see it's the river flow. When the water's up, the river the edge of the river will be right into here, and we'll wrap around this corner. The launch will sit out in here, but it's in a little bit of a protected area. So when you're getting into your kayak and launching, particularly if you might be disabled, you want an area that's a little quieter flow of water. So we tucked it back in what was a little natural inlet in there. This is construction of the rockery wall, and you can see the magnitude of the effort here. These are really substantially sized materials. This area is completed, so these are stream bed gravels. And this is the backfill that goes into the area. This will eventually get bladed back, and there'll be plantings put in here. And the excavator is sitting essentially where the walking trail will be. This is a shot looking back on the beach. So if you folks remember what this used to look like, it was covered with bushes, and the concept was just to restore what it was there originally. This is the old railroad grade here. And the beach area, there'll be picnic areas in each one of these areas, and then the shared use path through there. And you can see in the distance, they're setting the rockery wall.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but on that, while you're there, where would summer level be roughly in there?
It would be right about down there, so there's quite a distance in
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
This won't all remain beach, because it's a lot of beach. And so we've been looking at this with Bill a little bit, that there might be some thought about putting in some actual turf in here. Maybe not mowable turf, but something to soften the space up. There'll also be trees along in here, because otherwise it's just this big southern exposure that will get extremely hot in the summertime and not be friendly, you know, for folks to sit out there. But that's a deep beach. That's about 80 feet, 90 feet right there.
Yeah, would you anticipate any finer material there, or is it gonna be that fairly coarse
It's
stuff?
the trick there is we would like to put finer material in there, but we're worried about it just ending up in the river because of the flow that goes through there. What we are going to do is go through and run a tine through there to fluff it up a little bit. We compacted it because that's what stabilizes everything underneath. We'll run a tine through there, fluff it up, and then they'll pick out the big rocks in it. So probably things bigger than 6 inches will come out. But it's a challenge to size the material in there. With the engineer, the coastal engineer that worked on this and it's called a hydrodynamic analysis, sized the material in there, and that was our first reaction. It was very big, and he says, well, the science says that's how big it is. If you want to put it in a smaller one, you get to take ownership on that. And I don't want to own the beach disappearing. And it's similar to what you see at NIC Beach. It's just, it just needs to be fluffed up a little bit bigger material.
I don't know, NIC seems a lot sandier to me.
Some of it is, but it's also in some areas that the river flow isn't quite as fast as the river gets narrowed down through here. Yeah, we anticipate that reaction, folks. Why is it so rocky? And you're making a public investment, and you just can't take the risk of having the asset wash downstream, so to speak.
Is it possible to put a little sandier area up further away from the river so it doesn't wash down?
It's interesting you say that. We talked to Bill a little bit about that, and he's thinking about it. When the river comes up during flood stage, you can actually get water up into this area. The 100-year flood is somewhere up in here. And so you get in these recurrence intervals. Does Bill want to be in the business of replacing the beach every so often? Again, that becomes a maintenance issue and expense for him, and so he's reluctant to take on those expenses just because of his budget situation.
So is this on the tour tomorrow?
Yes, everything you see is here, yep.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to look at that.
This is the swim launch. They were actually placing the concrete today. And to give you your bearings here a little bit, this area, there'll be a trail that comes down here. So if you were in a wheelchair, you could come down here. This has a very slight grade to it. You can't see it very much for this picture. And then it gets into this point. You're in about 8 to 12 inches of water here. On the other side of that wall, you're in 2 feet of water. So when Bill and I had met with folks from the disabled community, we heard a variety of things that they want to be able to, some folks want to be able to wheel into the water, some people want to be able to wheel to a transfer wall. If you've been to some public pools, they have what's called a transfer wall. So you can wheel up to this and transfer yourself to this wall. There's grips on it. And then you can transfer yourself into a couple of feet of water, and then you can get out into here and then, transfer yourself into deeper water. If you wanted to reel all the way into the water, you could continue on down there. There'll be rails on here. So you can wheel yourself down, and then if you want to come back out, you grab a hold of the rails and pull yourself out. And there's also a rail along the end here that would be, you couldn't wheel off the end of it. It would stop you from continuing on down. And there's landings in each of these areas, maneuverable, flat landings if you're in a wheelchair. Also think about folks that just might be in a walker or just need a little bit of stability to get into the water was the concept of this. All the rails are removable. So when Bill gets to the end of the swimming season, he'll go and pull all the rails out. When the water comes up, it's going to submerge this thing, so you don't want logs hitting the rails. And then when the swim season starts back up, he'll go deploy the rails. So we're hopeful. The feedback we've gotten from the community is that the disabled community is very excited about using this. Oop, wrong direction. This is just another shot of them placing the concrete. That's it. Glad to answer any questions. And as I think most of you know, there were those that can make it. We're going to tour the site tomorrow while it's sunny and be able to see some more of this.
So is there any way to look at right now how you're coming in compared to budget?
Excellent question. We're below budget.
Good, excellent answer.
Yes, yeah. It's and we have encountered unsuitable soils back to these pictures here, where we anticipated encountering some of them. It's really difficult to estimate what that quantity is. So we had put a budget in, but we've encountered way more than we had anticipated. And of course, they were in the worst of areas. Some of it were at the end of this parking lot right here. The other parts of it were right in this area where the road goes through. So we were going way over our budget for those line items, but I think the board remembers La Riviere had offered to start processing on-site materials, both the topsoil and the material that you're seeing in here. So we worked through those numbers with La Riviere and saved a tremendous amount of money. So La Riviere, on their original contract, we're about $50,000 under their original contract. Overall, the project is, in the $150,000 under the budget that the board had set for it. We think we've encountered most of the, we'll call them I won't use the term, but the unknown conditions, because once you get out of the ground, most of the unknown conditions, moving forward, we don't anticipate seeing a bunch of other things. And so I think talking with Bill, if there's opportunity to add more landscaping, that was one of the features that we were cutting pretty tight and thin to keep the project within budget. But now, as we're getting towards the end, I think he may be back to Ignite, we may be back to Ignite saying, we're under your original budget and we would like you to consider allowing us to go spend some of it on landscaping, because that's where we had, I don't want to say shortchanged it, but really put the least amount of investment in the park area.
How's the mining going on Atlas Bluff?
It's going good. We've stopped for the most part because we've made enough topsoil material. We have been working with Steve Gillett, who's a partner of the city with DEQ with his brownfield money. He's doing some testing on the soils for metals content. We don't anticipate any, but it's going to end up in the park space, and the city doesn't want, and we don't want any long-term metals liability down in the public space. So DEQ is testing that material with their funding to confirm there's no metals in it. So then we can use that material on site. And there's other opportunities in that whole Atlas Bluff area to continue to make materials. It gets kind of a complicated discussion because you would be investing money to make the material, but you may not see a return on the investment until you sell the materials. Tony and I have talked a little bit about it, but it would require further discussion with the board.
Thank you.
Now, is the Atlas Bluff the same thing as Mount Hink?
It is, yeah.
Right.
We're supposed to call it Atlas Bluff, though, because it sounds,
Right.
yeah.
Phil, could you go to your last slide? Right there. Is the day docks marina down there, is that part, or did that get taken out?
That is taken out. Yeah.
So what would be the cost of that?
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. For some reason, I think that this dock was in the $200,000 range. Docks are expensive to build. You obviously could make it smaller to fit within a budget that the board might choose to make it to fit into.
The reason I ask is because Area 13 up there might be more marketable if it had some kind of day dock parking.
Good point.
I mean, when there was no bids for it, was that correct?
Correct. We took it out of the scope of work.
Right.
When we had shown this image, and I probably should take the dock out of here, there was several members of the public that captured it as it was going in. It is, what will be there, and they noticed how it narrowed up the river here. So they were very concerned about that, contacted Bill Greenwood, and Bill explained it's just a concept. We haven't chased a permit on it. If it is something that you would be contemplating, we would need to go get an encroachment permit. It would not stay in that configuration. We would move it a little closer to shore, and it would come off in this direction through here.
Is there any grandfathering from the former mill site? Because there was actually some kind of access point there, wasn't there?
There was a landing there that they would, it was used for a long time by pulling barges up to it. In the title report that we looked at, we didn't see, and I've looked for permits through here, asked Department of Lands about encroachment permits, and we can't find any. I think back in the day, those things just happened by the upland property owners, so we don't see them in the record now. I don't anticipate it would be an issue to secure an encroachment permit from the state that didn't narrow up the channel for navigation issues, which, as you guys know, there's pilings that run all the way through here, which we're not removing as part of the project.
Yeah, whatever uses were there, they probably were in there before they had permitting, so that's probably long gone.
Yeah.
I've heard around $42, $43 a foot for concrete docks.
You would be, we're currently estimating docks at $65 a square foot.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm surprised at that. All
yeah.
right.
It's like a lot of things right now, the cost of materials and whatnot. And that's when we estimated, that includes pilings and all the different,
Yeah, that was just dock only, that
Yeah.
wasn't pilings and installation.
yeah.
I agree with Mick, it would be nice if at some point there was funding available to do a scaled-down version of the dock there and have a day-use dock or something. I saw objections when we had the open houses, but most of that was, when I talked with people, they perceived it as having access taken away for private moorage, not necessarily with a day-use dock. I didn't hear the objections to that.
Yeah, the objections we've heard is just in the location of it in the channel.
Yeah, I could see
What
that.
would happen if you moved it a little further northwest?
In this area?
So it's wider there.
It is, and
You got that little cove up there. If you went up there, you might have a little wider space in the river.
we could, part of the idea of locating it here was the proximity to the restrooms.
Sure.
And then also, sometimes these places become loading places for your friends and family. So you might go launch your boat, and then where you launch your boat, it's a challenge for your friends to park. If you think of Higgins Point gets filled up with, so folks will launch their boat there, and then they'll go pick their friends up somewhere along Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive or go into town and pick them up there where there's more parking.
I'm just thinking if the concern is the narrowing of the channel, put it a little wider spot up there, and it would probably be less concern.
Yeah, that would add some benefit too back to the earlier point
Yeah.
about Area 13 here.
And you're still right on the park area there,
Yeah,
too.
and you'd wander down the trail and come to here.
Yeah. Just a thought.
Well, maybe if the long lead item to make those decisions are the encroachment permit. And so maybe what I'll do is speak with Bill about moving forward with the encroachment permit. We've done his encroachment permits for all the other facilities in here, so it's not a heavy lift to put that encroachment permit together, and size a dock that might be less than $200,000, and then just move forward with getting that permit.
And I would think any kind of a dock, we're talking next year. There's no way a dock would go in this year. I
Probably
mean,
not unless you
I
found one
don't think
on
there'd be the
sale.
time to have a dock company build it.
Remember, there are 2 docks up here that are part of this project. They're polyfloat docks. I can't remember if they have concrete decking on them or not. I think they do.
And where are those at?
They're up at the dog park.
Okay.
They actually border the dog park, and the function of them is to allow your dog to jump off the dock.
But they're not a dock that a boat could hook onto? or-
No, because they'll be surrounded by a boom,
Yeah,
a
yeah.
log boom,
Okay.
to prevent that exact thing happening. The dog park had the log boom around it. The budget was such that it wouldn't allow awarding the log boom that continues through this area here to protect the beach. And so when Ignite, when the city awarded the project, they didn't award that segment because it would have pushed us beyond the funding and kept our contingency in place. The numbers that I quoted you earlier anticipate installing that log boom because myself and Bill, I think the city thinks that's very important in front of this beach area so boats don't navigate into that area or beach themselves there. And it also anticipates awarding the irrigation pump station, which, remember, the logic behind that is it reduces his expense, the city's Parks Department expense for irrigating the park substantially. It has about I think it was a 6 or 7 year return, rate of return on investment. So both of those things have been important, have been Bill's number 1 and number 2 things. If he could add, he would head there, and then his third one is landscaping.
It didn't seem like that pump was that big of a return when you figure the cost of the pump. It was, maybe it is in 6 or 7 years it pays back. It was down the road.
Yeah, their irrigation bill, and again, I'm kind of going from memory, is something like, I think we've estimated it at like $40-some thousand a year here potentially.
Yeah.
Further questions or comments?
I guess we'll talk about the dock down the road when we see some more numbers, right?
Yeah, and what we'll do is, as we're getting a little more refined here, is that this is helpful for me to go back and talk to Bill and talk with Tony about it. Gives us a little bit of direction where the board might be thinking about, and we can start putting some ideas, menu together for you guys to think about.
Thanks, Phil.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Phil.